Um, this may be a little bit of an unusual title for this conference, and it's also in a kind of unusual space. It's the last presentation of the event. So I'm hoping not to be too redundant to things that we've heard here. So we've had a lot of education. We've heard about what is open source, how do I use it, about processes, about tools, about consultancy and how necessary that is, about maturity, etc. So this is a talk about a tool that is right in its infancy. Actually, it's not only a tool; it's a set of tools, and we'll understand a little bit of that a little bit later. It's called OSCAR, and you'll know why OSCAR in a bit. And it's a project which is currently being set up on the Eclipse Foundation. Just before we start, quickly who I am. I am from a different company, so I see myself more as the ambassador. For OSCAR. I'm working for a still in stealth mode being company called Codescoop, and we are a mixed team of people that have heavily worked in the software composition analysis space before. So we have had careers at Black Duck, OpenLogic, and other companies, and we think that working with open source is not only about understanding what's in there, understanding the forensic view of open source in your stacks, but it's really very much about getting to use open source as much as possible with as least risk as possible, and we are building software around that. And I'm seeing the problem that this is going back and forth. I've had that before, so bear with me. You will see the initial screen. Whenever I'm not talking fast enough, just look strange into my eyes, and I will fix that. I'm sorry for that. So that's me. Quickly through the agenda. So we will talk, obviously, sometimes repeat, sometimes disclose what SCA is, and why are we talking about SCA at all? I mean, SCA is obviously a settled discipline, and it's being used in enterprises and by individual people and by teams. So is there any problem with SCA? And if yes, what could be the problems? What's already existing? What are the available tools? What are the available tools in open source? And what is missing? What are the blank spots here? And then we are diving into OSCAR and what that fixes of these things. So first of all, let's find a little bit of a definition of SCA. So obviously, SCA is the short form for software composition analysis. And it typically describes tools around understanding what's inside your stack. And when I say your stack, that's your software, the software that you're building or operating. So it's not always clear that you're using a web server or a XML parser or whatever. So first of all, it's around understanding what is in there, and it's mainly SCA in the sense that we are talking about today is mainly around open source, and that's where the tools exist. I'm sorry that I have to do this flipping here, but I don't think there's a solution for that now. Maybe this will be a problem, but anyway, so it's mainly open source, but some of the SCA features also apply to the stacks that you have in the enterprise, which could also be called the inner source stacks. Topic areas typically addressed by software composition analysis. Number one is compliance, so to find out what licenses are being used and whether or not this is a problem, if there's obligations that need to be fulfilled and how they are going to be fulfilled. We had a good talk by Jeff today to get clarification on that. Number two topic, and you may argue whether one is more important than the other, is the topic around security. So is it risky to use open source or any other third-party tools? So finding out about vulnerabilities, about possible denial of service risk, etc. So that's number 2. Number 3 is this good stuff. I mean, what are the methods to understand what open source components are good and what are bad, and what means good and bad? Well supported, well maintainable, etc. And finally, last not least, it's also about cost. So costs of using open source software in terms of, you need to review open source components to understand what they do, if they do it well, who is behind it, etc. But also you need to think about how costly or not costly is it to maintain what you're using, support if you don't want to do it yourself, is there possible support, etc. So these would be typical topic areas of SCA. So I started with saying license compliance and security management are typically disciplines addressed by today's offerings, whether it be commercial offerings or open source offerings. But there may be other interesting topic areas also around the usage of open source. So, for example, whether or not you are able and allowed to export the resulting software when you're using open source pieces, how you talk with your supply chain. What does that matter if you need to give software to customers or OEMs, then this could be a problem, and there are solutions for that, but maybe there's more elegance to be done. We talked quickly about quality. Functional analysis is a problem to understand what the component does. I mean, if you know what you're searching for, you're in a good shape. But if you don't, if you just have a rough idea of a problem that you need to solve, I need a I need a graphical library that allows me to display transparent data in 3-dimensional format and liquid and what have you. How do you find that? So identifying and describing functional behavior of components. You may want to understand a little bit more about the complexity of the components. That has to do with maintainability, of course. You may want to understand how general or generic a component is. So the whole topic of architecture. Obligations, again, we've heard several talks about that, obligation management. So when you are aware of something that you need to do, who is helping you with that? Who tells you what you need to do if you need to deliver the source code? Who tells you what you have to do if you have to report an export violation because your software can't be exported to a certain country? So this whole management. Then going upstream, all the topics like contribution and distribution. So actually, those are different topics. So contribution to open source platforms and projects, but also distribution. If you want to distribute your code, is that a no-brainer or not? And last not least, support again. So if you want to take a kind of 30,000-foot viewpoint on that, all of that I've just described would be typically functionalities. They lead to a certain architecture, and they lead to describable features. But you can also, and that's technology. That's stuff that you need to build. That's almost the easiest part. But then, if you want to create something meaningful, you also may need or want to understand about what is the value for me? What's the value for my enterprise, for my business model? What's the purpose? Is that a different way of sourcing? I mean, just downloading something is one way, but is there maybe more to just having free access to software? So those are thoughts that you could have, and then managing such a tool and a project around these tools implies things like thinking about the governance that you need, about the organization of the project, etc., and defining a certain process. So that's all the environment that you need to look at. If you're looking at open source projects, whether it be for tools or for something else, that's all the same. So this is what we've seen, and we is just almost accidentally is myself and a couple of other people when we've spoken to larger software producers. So this shows, these are examples from a conference that was happening in October this year. And these are examples from Siemens. This is an example from here. This would be an example from SAP. And that would be an example from Bosch. And the common denominator is when they show in a conference that talks about, what are we using, how are we addressing the open source problem or the open source topic, this is how they express themselves. So you always have components. In the case of here, this is very heavily open source loaded. So the tool set is very heavily around open source. In the case of Siemens, there is a central component, which is again an open source tool to do scanning for Solgy, which does a certain way of scan your software stack. And then there's SAP telling the world that automation of compliance is possible if you do some restrictions. And they have built stuff around commercial tools. And then there's Bosch saying we solve inventory problems with open source, in that case Software 360, and we combine them with other things that are either commercial, self-built, or open source. And that's our structure. So the common denominator here is there's a lot of spending involved. There's spending for some of the tools involved. So this is a combination of buying or licensing tools, using open source tools, and doing your own work with dashboards, etc. So there's a lot of spending. But if you look at this, not only are the pictures different, but they use all different stuff. What's not inside here is that all of these guys are also using commercially available SCA tools. And typically, they're using not only one, but they may use 2 or even more SCA tools. So at this conference, we had some samples of commercial SCA vendors, and they have their strengths and their weaknesses. But the common denominator, other than that most of them do some kind of scanning, some kind of vulnerability management. The common denominator is that one size doesn't fit all. Michael?
If you allow me that, or would you rather have questions at the end?
No, fine.
What does little reuse mean? What does reuse mean in that context?
Reuse in that context?
It's not really about reusing clearing results, right?
No, absolutely not. That's a good question. Reuse of that stuff. So everybody builds their own dashboards. Everybody builds their own processes. Everybody has their take of using stuff. Sometimes there is reuse. That's why I'm saying, I hope I'm saying little reuse. Yeah, I'm saying little reuse and no reuse. So in the concrete example, Bosch and Siemens, they are using Software 360, but they are doing different things with around that. So that's the reuse of the customized software that's happening in these companies is countable. Make sense?
Yeah, maybe we can pick up later.
Okay. So again, the observation here is there is a combination of using proprietary tools, custom development, and that custom development is typically not reused from not only from company to company, but also inside the company. It's not always centrally managed and deployed for everybody, but it's definitely not used across companies. And the other observation is that these companies have scanned the available open source tools and just found islands. And what does that mean? They've just found functionalities which covers certain functionalities, but there's nothing that is the big hit. So in summary, there is duplicated or even more spending for the combination of commercial SCA tools and building stuff yourself. So what else did we hear? And when we say we, there's this series of conversations that, that myself and colleagues were involving companies like the ones that have been named into, and those were typical quotes that we hear. So people said, well, there's currently a consolidation on the tool vendor side, which is true. There's a lot of buying and also disappearing on the market. There are some new ones that have more or less success. So the bigger development shops, they think this is not per se healthy. So a merger can be a good thing, but it doesn't have to. So sometimes the acquiring company thinks that they have to change the direction or they have to refocus. So that comes with possible problems. We have heard very often that the data, the underlying data needs to be open and bidirectional. What does that mean? The proprietary solutions, typically their assets are the data this is working on. So we've heard a lot that making changes to that data or additions to that data or even adding their own assets to the data is typically difficult. So that was a complaint that we heard. Another thing that we heard is more a procedural problem that has nothing to do with the tool vendors, but it has to do with the tool vendors also because typically they are set up in a way that these tools are operated in an ivory tower, if you want. So they are not typically operated by developers or architects or teams that are at the beginning of the tool chain, but they are very often the processes include throwing software into a department, and that's typically called the open source office, and things are being analyzed there, and then a result comes back, which is either thumbs up or thumbs down or something in the middle. So there were complaints there. People want to be more agile. They want to be shifting left more, and that's what typical solutions don't allow. Then open source management is more than license scan. That's a comment that we heard a lot. So it's not only about scanning stuff and pointing fingers. Open source management starts at selection and then goes the full circle, and part of that is also scanning, but it's completely not all. Existing open source offers promising but small, so that needs again some explanation. So many of the existing open source alternatives exist, and they have some quality, and they have some sometimes they are better in areas than commercial tools, but very often they are supported only by very small teams. These teams are sometimes or very often embedded into bigger enterprises, but the teams are usually very small. So there's a lot of 1-2 man shows, and there's some that are supported by 5 people. And that's typically the size of the team. So there's a little risk in the open source offering that if these 1 or 2 people lose interest or they're moving on, then the whole potentially interesting offering is not valid anymore. And last but not least, talking about costs, commercial SCA offerings are not cheap. So there are some levels of differences, but they typically come with a price tag. And if you have to use 2 or more, then this gets even worse. Okay. So let's dive into OSCAR now. OSCAR obviously stands for open, like open source, software composition analysis, and then there's different interpretations about the R, reload, revented. I prefer the rethought. Today, this is where OSCAR is. Actually not. I mean, it's probably a little bit more like that. So there has been a lot of thought processes with a team that I'm going to introduce soon. There are building blocks which may or may not be used. And there's also a lot of demand. So these demands here, these are directly from a workshop that has been conducted with a team of again industry potential supporters of OSCAR, and the gray ones are that would be great, but the orange ones were agreed by the crowd to be prioritized, focused, etc. I'm not going through all of them, and I'm probably going to be a victim of this disappearing again. But common sense was around integration. So this is both integration into the developer's workspace. So there can be analysis done right away. But also in integration into the CI and DevOps scenarios. So there must be some automation possible. So everything that can be automated should be automated in that field. Quality is a little cluster of things. 10 minutes for responses. That came from more than one of the members there. Just to address that, it typically takes weeks or even months for analysis to come back, and then you have all the problems that you have when things are delayed. Identification also of binary stuff, including pictures, including executables, etc. Where's obligation management? I don't know. Snippet scanner and data. You may have heard about this during this conference. That's still important if you are working with compiled languages. So you want to understand if there's modifications of source code in C or C++, for example, languages. So that's been discussed and aligned between 6 potential members, which are here. Siemens, Bosch, SAP, Cisco, and Ericsson. So, companies of some weight. And this is only saying that they expressed an opinion to this. It's not carved in stone that they will be supporters, but there is expressed interest in this topic. A little bit of a 5-bullet journey through what will be addressed by OSCAR. And again, this is not my or our invention. This is something that came back from these users. So number one, the important thing here is continuous. So OSCAR will be an open source solution for continuous software composition analysis. Again, starting with compliance and security, but in the long run, addressing also other stuff. Continuous means not living somewhere in the lab, in an open source center, but being part of the lifecycle management and being called as early as possible and used as early as possible. Number two, and it will be a software distribution. So currently existing, there are many single functionalities that will change, and there will be certain instances of OSCAR being packaged as distribution. That's a non-trivial. It looks more trivial than it is because it involves also taking in other open source offerings that may not be under the same license, and there's some challenges. But the goal is that you can go to a site and download the OSCAR system as a full distribution, and that's going to be on a small notebook, and on a team server, and also in the cloud. And again, I just mentioned it's going to be existing and new open source building blocks. Existing blocks will be talked about right in the next slide. And there's stuff to be built. So we started in this group. We started to build software, and that's going to be inside the OSCAR project. It's also going to be an architecture and an application bus. So that seems trivial, but we believe that it's a good idea to start with a specification of how things go together. If you pull in different sources from commercial and non-commercial tools, you need to make sure they speak to each other. So that's one of the first things that will be defined and will be in the format of a message bus. That's the very first one, and then there will be discussions around data storage, etc., which is necessary. Fourth point is this cannot fly if it's just an open source project. So if it's just being started somewhere and then everybody sits back and waits until somebody contributes, that's not going to fly. And that's a little bit the role people like myself, we are orchestrating this initial, pushing it over the cliff kind of activities, and the industry coordination will be organized in the way of an Eclipse working group, and I'm going to talk about that just a little bit later. So again, number 4 is crucial for this to be successful and fly. And the 5th, but not least important point is this is the production setup will be organized under the Eclipse Foundation, and they have methods to do that. They have good standard processes, etc. So they will be a good home. I just mentioned I'm very sorry that this happens, and I have no explanation. But anyway, so I just mentioned that there are already existing parts out there, and in the scanner area, for example, there is source code scanning by Fossology and Scan Code. In the more package-oriented scanner area, there's the open source resource toolkit. There's Graphias and there's Quartermaster. They do similar stuff. There's where it's clearly defined. There's data sources coming and being supported by Microsoft and others. There's software heritage, which is all around making sure that nothing of information is getting lost, because open source also ages. So if you look for something that is already 10 years old, it may not be there where it was in the beginning. So they solve that problem. So in total, there is stuff to start with, and these are all offerings that we have started to speak to, gather their interest, and we've also kind of valued them, whether or not they are, as I said, 1-man shows, 2-man shows, 5-man shows, and who's behind that. And that's the meaning of the quoting, who is behind that, who's supporting that. So typically, if you look at ORT, for example, the Open Source Resource Toolkit, then it's a small project with interesting functionality, but all of the guys are working for HERE, and they have the backup from the HERE company to do this. So it's a bit of twofold. Those are not garage projects. Those are projects that are very often supported by bigger shops. And there's also been some talk. I don't want to be too technical here, and also cannot, but there's thinking within this group of how an architecture should look like. I was speaking about the bus that has been designed. So giving all that, there is a solid backup and support, not just by visionaries like us maybe, but there's some big names behind that, both in the form of software that is already being committed, but also in the form of people saying, we could be interested in support OSCAR. So all this together basically means OSCAR, if you remember this whiteboard at the beginning, it's not a greenfield project. So there's the existing modules, if you remember that slide. There's an architecture. There is initial talking. There's some industry backup. So we're not starting from scratch here, and we are starting with a lot of enthusiasm, I would say. So I mentioned this working group, and this is terminology here. So OSCAR is basically the technical, if you want, the technical project based on the Eclipse Foundation. Everybody can contribute. Everybody that thinks he or she has something to say can be part of it. And this will also be a possible bucket to get all these smaller projects and at least pamper them. Not all of them have an Eclipse license, which would be necessary if they are a full member of the OSCAR project. But it is possible to give them a new home. And OpenSCA, that's the name of the working group, the Eclipse working group, that is consisting of these industry members that I quoted. There are some already available for a second round. The first round will be very much Europe-centered. The next round will probably go much more into a international space. So with the Open SCA working group, we are in the process of finalizing the charter, which is basically the Bible for a working group. So the working group is in being established, and OSCAR is already existing. And this is like being in the delivery room. It's like, you know, getting a baby. So some things have been done already. OSCAR and OpenSCA have been officially launched at the EclipseCon back in October in Germany. The industry consortium meeting, the first one has been done at the end of October. The legal paperwork is underway. There is some paperwork that's being demanded by the Eclipse Foundation, and there's some corresponding paperwork that is all around, you know, funding and financing, which is happening in parallel. The next actions have been decided. Basically, the official kickoff meeting in the second half of January, and some things have been established, like a common document area, Slack channel that everybody is in. We have currently established bi-weekly calls, and we're still looking for people to, you know, to come in. So just go to the Eclipse Foundation, look for OSCAR, and you will be brought to what it takes to eventually contribute or look at the first results. And in summary, and this hopefully brings me home in time. If you remember the initial problem statement that we had, so the problems that were heard from a number of people that we have interviewed and spoken to, those were problems around the market is developing into a direction which is hard to predict. We would like to have data and tools open, visible, and transparent. That's not always the case. We see that through some of the consolidations, we are not sure whether the tools that we have licensed will remain in function and will have the same focus and be furtherly developed. We have a problem with this ivory tower scenario that is very often being implied by the existing tools. So these would be the answers to those concerns. Obviously, open stands for open source. Open source addresses a possible vendor lock-in. So you're in the driver's seat yourself. And that is true for open source and data. So transparency on the data, being able to commit to the data is important for many. And it allows for, if you want, for crowd QAing the data. So it possibly allows for quicker addition to the necessary databases. That could be one stream that is established in the OSCAR project, allowing developers to put their new revision data into the database instead of waiting for somebody to, browse what's happening and then looking at it again. So that's addressing that part. Shifting left, I've talked about. So it starts where code is being produced. So some of us dream about something like a almost real-time behavior. So somebody is looking for open source code, is making this decision with or without the help of OSCAR, and puts the data into his or her stack, and then OSCAR will determine that and say, hey, by the way, this is good stuff. I just wanted to remind you that the license isn't fitting to that policy, and maybe it's the best time now to look at the consequences and or allow me to flag this, so for later scanning, it's already pre-populated. So that would be that. Less need to build custom patches, the one that I was addressing to also with your question. So current situation is neither the commercial tools nor the open source tools, if they stand alone, will run it completely. So less need to build custom patches in terms of this will be completely solved within the OSCAR project then, hopefully. And the addressing of small teams, small solution teams, possibly causing problems if they fall down. So who takes over? If they are all in a bigger context, that addresses that. So if people have to move on, then if they are part of OSCAR, then this gives at least the opportunity for the sub-projects to be continued. And I think we've seen enough examples of that it doesn't have to stop at compliance and security. And since it's an open source project, it will be free for consumers. And alternative sourcing path for drivers, so for those members that put effort, budget, contribution in, they can see it as an alternative way of sourcing software. So there is, just taking stuff from the open source stack and taking it as it works. There is buying software, and there may be a middle way of influencing certain contributions to open source stacks just by actively contributing energy and money and stuff. So again, happy to have more contributors to OSCAR and more members of the OpenSCA. And that's it, and I hope I didn't overshoot with all these technical problems. Any remaining questions? Yeah?
Well, perhaps you could offer a little bit of a contrast. What will this offer that, for instance, something like Fossology doesn't offer today?
Well, the Fossology would be an interesting integral part that addresses a very specific need, which is looking with a specific mechanism at source code, looking for copyright, looking for quotations of origins, etc., and bringing on the results. So that's a good start. Everything that's connected, just in this scanning, in this analysis area, everything that's connected to finding out similarities, changed code, snippets, refactored code, etc., which still is relevant because it still has an origin in an open source component, but it's not one-to-one identical, would not be covered by Fossology. Now, one answer could be, to ask the likes of Flexera and Synopsys. They do this kind of stuff. But then the next question would be, so what about, for example, obligation management that is customizable and that has, so it's if you think onions, it's Fossology and then more and more and more. Okay.
Please allow me a remark because I'm involved in maintaining SW360 and Fossology and also providing that to Siemens. I'm not sure about this custom patches, or I'm not sure how this should be overcome in an open source project, because the variant of Fossology that we're using inside Siemens has two major differences to the community version. And one is that we have a specialized file format export, which is used inside Siemens. And we didn't contribute it because we felt like SPDX would be the right way to go, and coming with a second file format would maybe confuse the ecosystem. So I'm not sure why this custom. I mean, if that's being considered a custom patch, then that wouldn't make sense to contribute it. And the second thing is we have adapted it to our internal single sign-on system within the organization, and that's also something I think every open source project will likely have that problem, that their organization-specific user management or infrastructure needs adaptations. And apart from that, I'm not aware of custom patches. And I think for SW360, the situation is very similar.
Okay, fair comment. And I think I may have expressed myself not clear enough with this whole patching thing. So I'll give you some alternative examples. Ericsson, for example, they speak about that openly, so I can disclose that here. They spend 7-digit figures of creating inventories, creating dashboards, creating process systems that creating security routing systems, which they don't find a solution for in the market. And that would be typical patches or additions, software additions to their normally commercial tools and their open source tools, which they also use, And that is unique. That's a value of a couple of million euros or whatever, dollars. And that's not transferable to any other situation. So the idea is with Oscar to take away a little bit of that, replace it with something that's meaningful also for others, and by that reducing the amount of customized software.
But is the Ericsson case really about R&D money for software development, or is it running the office?
No, it's not.
Like 70 years
Yeah.
ago, and I think I
Good.
met Julian and Matthias.
Good point.
So it feels like it's running their office.
Yeah,
They
that's
also
right.
develop software.
That's right. Money is for development shops like that is not the point, but focusing is an important point. I mean, they are saying we are building software, but we shouldn't build software for stuff that we can't sell or that is not in the core of our business. So I would agree to your assessment there. Okay.
So I was going to say I'm slightly surprised that you, in your suggestion, that you would start with the security and the compliance.
Okay.
I think, having worked I managed the third-party ID for ARM, and I think if you try and solve all the challenges in one go, it becomes very difficult.
Agreed.
So I would say you need to have targeted and focused sort of problem that you're trying to solve, and then once that is done, you can then move into the next one and expand on the capabilities.
Yeah. I fully agree.
Things that already exist, from what I understand.
Yeah, that's right.
You're not trying to reinvent the wheel with like SW360, which is sort of an inventory aspect. You can pathology and scan code. Always better to use multiple scanners. You can plug those in. I'm familiar with Thomas's source toolkit, although not very from a technical standpoint. But so I'm not. It doesn't seem like when you think about what has evolved in the tooling landscape for open source tools for managing open source, open source on both ends, that having worked for a tool vendor some years ago, it's amazing. It's super awesome to see like this explosion. Although when I was at that same thing in Prague, I guess it was, or like, are you guys like competing now? This is let's all like come together. So it sounds like, do I have the right impression that you're sort of taking those things and then like filling in the gaps and trying to sort of stitch
Correct. That's one of the things. So there seems to be a common sense about exactly what you said. There's a lot of quality coming into existence, and there's a lot of variety also. There's a lot of overlap. There's need for an instance to funnel that,
right,
and to connect that.
Like a management governance kind of thing.
Exactly. So it's for many situations, it's just okay to take this and this and this and build your own thing with limited effort. For other situations, especially when it needs to scale, this is not the right way. So the both aspects of quality is being produced and is coming into existence, but very often it's a thin layer of this being further developed or dying for all the reasons that open source has, and good reasons also.
And that was my understanding with Quartermaster, was to kind of help provide some structure.
Quartermaster is a good example, but Quartermaster also is a good example of a very small team. I mean, they are in two. So if they commit to doing this for the rest of their lives, all is good. But how sure can you be?
Team as well, are you just trying to be use the Eclipse Foundation to corral the other small teams and create a bigger?
That is right. That's right. And by the way, we or myself, we are trying to pull out as quickly as possible. We don't want to be the next Endocode or the next whatever Red Hat, or that by embracing everything creates a business model. That's not going to happen. So we believe that it's necessary to get especially bigger enterprises that are producing software to move their, how can I say that politely, to move their legs into a certain direction, and that's what we see as our task here. And then this needs to be completely democratic and completely on stable feet within the Eclipse organization. If that's not
all of those teams that I know, we talked to someone that personally want that. I mean, I don't think they, like the guys at Hero, put that out at Hero because they want to see that happen. I mean, and they have any. So I think, yeah, it's very right that this is what
yeah. Yeah.
So then it's also going to plug into the development. I mean, one of the things, right, this has to be solutions that work for engineers. So I know, I mean, I'm not an engineer, but it's like, needs to be able to plug into different build systems, right?
Build
So that's
system,
also
IDEs,
part.
yeah, exactly. So it will plug into build systems to serve automation tasks wherever possible. I'm personally not convinced that that this is completely automizable, but it also should live very close to the developer in their IDE, so they can do a quick look at where does this come from, what are the obligations, and then make their judgments.
But isn't that also a point of why a lot of different companies have customized things because they have different build systems, and so it's sort of like that single sign-on issue, from my understanding.
Yeah.
And how do you, if you all have different build systems, and how do you kind of create something that plugs into all of them?
I would.
Everyone has a single sign-on system, even if they're all different. So being able to build APIs that play nicely with single sign-on systems should take you up a level, so that you're then dealing with the single sign-on system rather than having to build everything.
Good point. I mean, this discussion is a good proof for why it will be necessary to create a basis in form of an enterprise service bus and an application service bus, because all of these existing tools have APIs. They all are somewhat, but you don't want the situation where you want to understand, how much SPDX this is supporting, and is it in both ways, and how to combine this with that. You want a common. SPDX actually is also a good candidate for an analogy why this makes sense. For my personal taste, it should be much further by now. After years, it should be the backbone for supply chain management systems. Whether I know, and that's why I'm daring.
Interrupting this lively discussion, we are out of time. We have to convert the room to do a wrap up. Thank you, Stefan. You obviously
very welcome.
You obviously encouraged a lot of thought here, and I hope that you'll all continue the conversation over drinks. But we're going to have to say thank you to everyone. So first, thanks to Stefan.
All right, thanks.